Hey everybody, we wanted to make a small group video for you to kind of lay out what the things small groups are doing are so that you have a good sense of what a small group is supposed to do in a way that is complete but also pretty simple. Because we want you to be able to feel like, okay, my small group is doing these 5 different things, but we don't want it to feel like an overwhelming level of complexity. So let me go over what the 5 things we have told you over the last year and a half small groups are to be doing and kind of how that would work out so that you can get a sense of exactly what you're doing and the order and place those things fall. Okay, so there's 5 things, okay, that you want to be doing in your small group. The first is community, that is building real, authentic, deep relationships. 2, study, learning about God's word and what God would have us believe about himself and the gospel and the Bible. 3rd is prayer. We need to be praying with each other, and small groups are a place where we want prayer to happen. 4th is supporting the missionaries that we have assigned to our groups, so that we're groups that are global Christians. And 4th is organized service, or getting out and serving. Now, the goal is not to do all 5 of these things in every small group meeting. The idea is that all 5 of these things are significantly part of the life of each small group. That we're growing closer together, we're studying God's word, we're serving, we're supporting our missionary, and we're praying. That doesn't mean you try to do all 4, even not organized service in every meeting. It just means you want them all to be part of your small group life. Okay, so let me go over them real fast. The first is community. That breaks down into 5 things. And John's going to give you a handout on this so that you can kind of click through them in your head. But trying to build deep relationships, if you think in these 5 categories, this will help. That is knowing and being known. How do you foster disclosure of what's going on basically in people's lives and what's on their hearts? If you know what's going on in their lives and what's on their hearts, you'll know enough to connect with people, and you'll begin to feel closer to them. Loving and being loved, actually taking actions that are loving towards each other. Serving and being served, serving other people when they're in crisis and in need, and allowing people to serve you. Admonishing and being admonished, that is actually risking relationship for the good of another person sometimes, by telling them what you believe they need to hear for their own good. And lastly, celebrating and being celebrated. That is taking a moment here and there in different ways to really celebrate what's happening in the lives of other people, or in the group as a whole. But usually it's going to be individual. It's going to be somebody's graduating from a master's degree. They worked like 4 years to try to get through while they had kids and were working. Or their 22-year-old kid is getting out of jail for the 2nd time. But they're hoping they're really going to turn a corner. That's, things that are part of real life that we need to celebrate, because we're not really a celebrating culture, or at least we don't celebrate the right things. And you need to acknowledge what God is doing in people's real lives. So if you think about those 5 things, it'll really help you connect with this whole community bit, okay? In terms of study, I'll talk about that at the end, so I'm going to skip it right now. The 3rd thing is prayer, and that is what happens in small groups a lot is people say, okay, it's prayer time. Does anybody have any prayer requests? And what happens is everybody then talks about their aunt or their uncle or somebody at work who has some kind of prayer request. And your prayer time at small group ends up being things like, dear God, please help John's sister's brother's coworker who's having something serious like cancer, right? But what that does is it's real prayer for real people, but it's not directing us towards God's will for our life as a group and a church and a people. So what we want to do is we want to send prayer requests from the church, the movement size of the people, to the small groups so that you're praying bigger rather than smaller, mainly in the small group. And one of the questions you can ask yourself is, what I know about God's truth and what I know about God's mission in the world and what I know about God's vision for us as a people, what would God's prayer request be? Instead of asking all the people in your group what their prayer requests are for other people, ask yourself the question, what would God's prayer request for our group be? What would he want us to pray in relationship to who we are towards his purposes in the world and what he's trying to accomplish for redemption? Does that make sense? And so keep your eyes open and make sure you try to incorporate the prayer requests that you get from John. It's not just we want you to be praying for the church. It's we want you to pray for big things and for your heart to expand as part of a larger movement. Does that make sense? You can't respond. So 4th is the missionaries. Very recently, we've gotten missionary packets to each small group. Now, you need to know there's about 30 small groups and there's about 30 missionaries. So the same missionary is not in 5 or 6 or 7 different small groups. So what you do really matters. And all we want you to do on this is just to figure out what are some things that you can do to support your missionary. And if you don't know, get in contact with us. Get in contact with John. Get in contact with the missions team and ask them. And they will hopefully be able to help you. And this isn't something you do every single week, but it's something that you schedule in periodically. Maybe every couple of months you have a small group meeting where you're specifically doing something for your missionary, like you're all going to put together a care package for them or something like that. It's maybe something you hit a couple times in the summer, or one month you say, okay, this month we're all going to write an encouraging letter to our missionary, or you set up a schedule so that every couple of weeks or somebody in your group is writing something, just an encouraging letter, or that you're praying for them or something. And also getting their prayer requests and incorporating that into your prayer time is a really good thing to do. Does that make sense? And then in terms of organized service, hopefully you already know enough about this, but the hub is set up to connect you to any organized service you might want. And we have the people in the deacon ministry. We actually have a team focused on this to help you, and John can connect you with them very easily if you need to connect. So there's a bunch of ways to connect with this, but the idea is that your group will get out there about quarterly to serve people outside of our church. And my recommendation is not to do this in addition to everything else you're doing, but to not have a small group meeting that week other than your organized service, and just get together to do your organized service. Okay, so 3 things about what we're doing right now. One is keep your eyes open and your inboxes open for prayer requests, and try to incorporate them in a significant or at least meaningful prayer time in your small groups, at least periodically, every other meeting or so. Secondly, and let me just tell you what they are right now. Associate pastor vote for Lloyd, be praying for that. That's important for our church. Be praying for us to become a more hospitable and caring church for new people coming here. That's really important right now, and God is bringing people, and we need them to be embraced and accepted and drawn in. And the third is, there are 2 classes going on right now, the parenting class and the financial peace class, that have a lot of people in them. There's something like 75 people in the parenting class. Pray that God would do something in the parenting of those families that would be really important for the lives of the children that they're raising. Pray that for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Secondly is we're going to be doing a new series that's coming up very soon. We're going to end Mission Month at the end of February, and then we're going to be going into about a year-long series that will break up a bunch of ways, but it's basically we're going to go through the whole Bible, and we're going to do 2 things. We're going to put the whole Bible together in the one story of redemption that goes through from beginning to end. And secondly, I'm going to preach the gospel out of every passage. I'm going to go through a number of different high points in different parts of the Bible, a number of different books, and show how the same dynamics of the gospel and how Jesus and the promise of Jesus is all the way along from beginning to end. We're going to use in our small groups this curriculum called the Gospel Project. And John is going to help break these down into a number of weeks. So what this will do is you'll be able to go through this slow enough. You'll have more than 1 week per lesson. So you can go through and really dig out more without being rushed through a curriculum. We think that's going to be really cool. And I'm going to preach about what's covered in here, plus some other passages as we go along, which I'm really excited about. I think at the end of this year, people who aren't well acquainted with the Bible will feel like they understand how it goes together and what the different parts are. And people who know their Bibles will understand on a level that they didn't understand before, how it all fits together and how the gospel goes through all of it. And I think that we'll all understand the dynamics of the gospel better as we go through God as the one who saves from slavery, who gives a promise that we can believe, who fights the battle that we can never win, who in all these different dynamics of redemption and salvation, the dynamics of the gospel that we have to know and believe on a deeper level. And I think as every week where we hear the gospel differently, it'll press it in deeper and deeper and apply it to places in our lives that we haven't really been able to apply it to yet. So I'm excited about this year. I hope you are too. And I think it's going to connect well with this small group study that you'll be doing. Comment any questions and we'll try to answer them.